in your experience, what are some of the non-negotiable personal qualities that you think a person must have in order to be an effective leader?
From my aspect and from the people that I work with, obviously honesty, capability, interpersonal skills, integrity, and by that I mean do what you say you will do. You don't know all of it, and you certainly don't. Sometimes you can be blindsided by things that you don't know or you hadn't thought about.
What's the best business or career advice someone has given you?
Oh gosh.
Ivy and Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future.
Our guest today is Peter Kerr, Chief Executive Officer of Mount Gibson Iron. Peter brings more than 25 years' experience across the Australian and Canadian mining sectors, with senior leadership roles spanning gold, uranium, base metals and iron ore. Having progressed from CFO to CEO, Peter offers deep insight into leadership impact, stakeholder engagement and culture. This conversation was recorded prior to the Koolan Island rockfall, and the insights remain highly relevant to both the site and the Mount Gibson's future operations.
Peter Kerr, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Thank you, David.
Really good to see you. I was thinking on the way here today, Peter, that you're our 28th guest on the podcast.
Fabulous. Well, very pleased to be number 28.
In just over a year or so. And it's interesting the feedback we're getting. We're steadily building an audience. And when we get feedback, it's usually people expressing positive comments about hearing the backstories of our guests. So in other words, things that are less commonly known about some of the high-profile mining leaders that we have conversations with.
That sounds demanding.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to get that sort of feedback. You know, I'm thinking of people like, guess we've had Cheryl Edwards, the chair of Westgold Resources, and indeed the first woman Attorney General of an Australian government, WA government in her case. And she talked about leaving school at the age of 16 to become a checkout chick at Woolworths. That's the phrase that she used. And then, you know, the rest is history. She built a very high-profile political and business career. Other listeners have picked up on the fact that Warren Pearce, CEO of AMEC, was a child chess prodigy.
That's something I did not know. I spoke to Warren the other day. So
well, there you go.
Right.
And another one that I recall people talking about is Tim Conversey. Tim is General Manager Organisational Development with Hancock Iron Ore, and he was a junior WA state representative in hockey. So these things are not don't often come out in conversations, but we dig a little bit deeper into the backstory. So on that theme, let's hear your backstory. What can you tell us about your early years, Peter?
My early years were Perth-based, so born and bred in Perth. Family living in a suburb at that stage, Swanbourne. Suburb called Swanbourne, which had a lot of returned servicemen. And so my background and my grandfather and great-grandfather had a military background. But my father and his father built a real estate firm in Perth City. It was called Peter Kerr and Associates. So I grew up basically as being an assistant and helping my father as a kid. Playing lots of sport and living a very nice family life. So I went off to school and university and ultimately qualified as a chartered accountant. Did all my normal things through here, and so that was in the days when universities were more face-to-face, less online, of course. Yep. Developed a large number of friends through that whole process, and then as I developed my career, went overseas after that. But otherwise, Perth, born and bred.
Yeah, and I did notice on your career history that you started off life in the financial services sector and then transitioned into mining. Why did you do that?
I think at that stage, so this is in the university in the second half of the 1980s, and then transitioning to work late 80s, early 90s, the vast majority of my clients, or the clients I dealt with, were mining related. They were gold, coal, some iron ore, generally smaller and mid-sized ones that were active on what back then was the second board of the ASX, which now no longer exists, but that's how I got to meet a lot of people in the industry and ultimately become very interested in it and join it.
Terrific. And is there something that you can share about yourself that not many people would know?
I'm sure there is. A couple of things. One I did as I was qualifying, I lived overseas a lot, and for a break from work for a while, I did a round-the-world yacht race called the Clipper Yacht Race, and it was one of these amateur ones with some professional skippers, and I was a crew member on the very first one. So that was fascinating. And secondly, I'm a type 1 diabetic since I was a teenager. So that means my body doesn't produce insulin and I inject whenever I eat. So that's something I've learnt to manage over many years, and I chair a medical research foundation into diabetes based in Perth currently.
Yeah. Going back to the Clipper event, so it's around the world.
It is. I did half the world, so I sailed from England. I qualified as a skipper in England, and I thought I'd just try something very different. So I got my skipper's ticket, joined one of the crew, and I think there were 10 or 11 boats in that initial race, and sailed across the Atlantic. We actually transited through the Panama Canal and then through to the Galapagos Islands and Hawaii, and that was my time stint up, so I stepped off.
What an adventure. Any particularly scary or hairy moments on the high seas?
Not in the Pacific, because that was beautiful sailing conditions, but in the Atlantic, very rough and strong wind weather, massive waves. So I learnt how to handle a boat in that kind of condition, which you learn on the job, basically, and loved it.
Do you sail regularly now?
Not enough now. I play other sports, but sailing has taken a back seat.
Yeah.
But occasionally my family and I do a trip where we might have boating involvement.
Right. Okay, terrific. That probably answers my next question. When you're not concentrating on your work, how do you relax?
I'm active. I try and be active all the time, and that is the type 1 diabetes aspect. You can't be sedentary. You have to watch your diet. You have to be as sporty as you can. So I play hockey with a bunch of slow but very fabulous vets players for a team called the All Stars from Westside Wolves in Perth, and I've been doing that for half a dozen years, and I have loved it. I used to play actually first grade hockey when I was at university for a number of years, but then dropped out of it for many years and came back. And then I also play cricket in summer. So for UWA here in Perth, there's a vets team, and we play 7 or 8 games a season.
Gee, you are active. Making me feel ashamed of myself.
I don't know about that. I try and keep active, actually. And then, of course, I have a wonderful family, wife and 3 children, and so that's more active than all the others.
Yeah, good on you. Let's talk a bit about leadership effectiveness. Obviously, you're the CEO of Mount Gibson Iron. And by the way, congratulations on your company's recent acquisition of 50% of the great Tanami Gold project.
Thank you.
That seems to me like a transformational opportunity for your company, because you're diversifying your production base into gold, and presumably, that's because of the declining life associated with your current flagship asset in Koolan Island. What can you tell us about the acquisition deal?
Sure. Well, look, the background to it is we've obviously been looking for another asset for a number of years, and we've looked over many possibilities, and it's difficult to find the right thing. And so earlier this year, when we knew that our Koolan Island operation would have a busy 18 months left, it's now got 12 months left, we looked at different commodities, what were the opportunities in Australia, and of course precious metals was an obvious one to think, well, actually that's now becoming an increasingly investment demanded product because of what's going on in the world. So we looked around at various assets, and at that time we're in an office building with a company called De Grey Mining, which was in the process of being acquired by Northern Star. So knowing that, and the fact that Northern Star's size was becoming very large, we approached Northern Star and asked what they were doing with this joint venture in the Northern Territory. A smaller project, but good resource base and a reasonable grade, but just not one that would move the dial for Northern Star, we thought, and that proved to be the case. And so the background, we approached the key managers of Northern Star that we know and asked about the project, negotiated a principal deal, and then did due diligence and announced that acquisition in July.
Yeah, well done. And I'm sure the shareholders and other stakeholders associated with Mount Gibson will benefit from that process.
We hope so. There's a long way to go yet, but
Yeah.
I think there's a real opportunity with that project, even though we have a very busy year ahead with Koolan Island.
As I look at the pictures of Koolan Island, it's such a scenic, picturesque site, isn't it? There must be no other mine site in the world as beautiful looking.
It's possibly the most picturesque mine camp. We know that from where it is. Have you been to that part of the world?
No, I've never actually been there, but I've seen the photos, of course.
If I present at a conference and ask, this is a Diggers and Dealers or those type of investment conferences, and ask who has travelled through the Kimberley on a cruise boat past Koolan Island, generally you get about a quarter of the people putting their hand up. It's a well-known place, and there are direct flights from capital cities in Australia to Broome during the tourist season. So a lot of people have been by, and we get a lot of questions as to what's happening on the island. People obviously want to go there, but they can't. It's a mine site on an island with no local community as such.
You've been in leadership roles for a good chunk of your career now, Peter. In your experience, what are some of the non-negotiable personal qualities that you think a person must have in order to be an effective leader?
From my aspect and from the people that I work with, obviously honesty, capability, interpersonal skills, integrity. And by that I mean do what you say you will do, right? Even if at times it turns out to be the wrong thing. Right, I have a very transparent type of style. It doesn't suit everyone, perhaps, and it might appear at times to be a bit wishy-washy. That's not the case. I'm trying to give people the free reins to go and do what they want to do, but keep those key principles there. Integrity and honesty is the absolute key to me.
They're often raised as some of the key issues in leadership, and I think also showing your vulnerability in the sense that you're not expected to have all the answers, and leaders rarely do. And
I can tell you I never have all the answers.
And I think by demonstrating that to your people and fessing up, it helps build the trust relationship with people. And I also think one of the qualities that is pretty elusive, but when you do get it, you've got a fantastic leadership level candidate, is the ability to make decisions under pressure where in the context of ambiguity and uncertainty. So, the mining industry obviously can be a potentially volatile one, and the ability to calmly make the best decisions you can in the circumstances is so important. And I think, and walking the talk, as you alluded to, is so important as well, to, demonstrate and model the behaviours that you want other people to replicate in your business.
I'd agree with that. I just think that dealing with human beings fairly and properly and politely is critical.
What about the challenges of your current role, Peter? What have you learned about yourself, and have your self-reflections helped you become a better leader at Mount Gibson over time?
I think my leadership is a function of both how I've learnt along the way, but also really fortunate to have learnt from people I've worked with, and who've worked for me effectively in roles. You absorb a lot along the way, and I think at times need to step back and just think about what people are telling you without immediately hitting that down or dismissing something. But that's how I've generally tried to work, and I've learnt that in tough times, and we've made some tough decisions at Mount Gibson. For instance, a few years ago, the iron ore price fell for medium and lower grade material rapidly after we'd started a small mine in the Midwest called Shine. That mine has since been packaged up with assets and sold to a company in which we've invested, and very happy with what they're doing there.
That was Phoenix, wasn't it?
Phoenix Resources,
Yep.
But at the time, I think the low grade or the medium grade discount, to put it in context, went from something like 5% to 35 or 40%. So it meant that we weren't making money from this and couldn't see ourselves making money from this without some serious change. And we made that tough call. And I'm sure in our business not everyone agreed with it, but I was looking at the numbers and the bigger picture and having to think about alternatives with stopping the mine, asking some of the people to move to our other operation. Some of the people needed to leave, and then go forward from there and package and divest. So that was quite a demanding process to go through, and it didn't happen immediately, but it was something we needed to stick to our plan on.
It must have been quite stressful leading up to that decision, and presumably you tapped into the knowledge base of other people around you, trusted individuals to offer their opinion and help guide you to make that decision.
I did. We had fabulous people and have fabulous people who were running that mine and operating it, and also in corporate office looking at the bigger picture. And so we all dealt with that as a team.
We often hear guests talk on this program about recognising that you have blind spots as a leader. Blind spots referring to those limitations in your thinking or decision making that have consequences, not just for yourself, but for the team you lead. What do you think about the process of trying to reveal and then address your blind spots, Peter, to become more effective as a leader?
I think ultimately it's very dependent on the ability of and the capabilities of the people that you bring into the business or that are in the business working in the teams. You said at the start you don't know all of it, and you certainly don't. Sometimes you can be blindsided by things that you don't know or you hadn't thought about. And that's possibly you might be able to avoid that if you're into every bit of minutiae. But if you're into every bit of detail in the whole business, I think the whole business suffers, and so does the team. So you're then very reliant on good people doing a job and then asking them the key questions. So rather than, from my perspective, I'm not a leader who would demand and say, you must do A, B and C. I would be putting it like, I think A, B and C are the risk areas. What are we doing about them? Do you agree? And you can see then immediately who responds to that and who doesn't. And if they don't, clearly then there's a discussion to have.
I think that is the key thing. Surround yourself by people that don't feel afraid to offer their point of view or even challenge or criticise the way that you're thinking and making decisions. You know, a lot of people have said that really the main job of a leader is to create a safe place for people to offer dangerous ideas. In other words, you know, encourage people to look outside of the square and respectfully challenge what's going on, challenge the status quo. And I think if people show intellectual honesty, and that requires a bit of humility, you know, that you are somewhat limited in what you can offer a particular problem, but you're curious to find out from other people what alternatives might exist. And then you've got to have the flexibility, don't you, to be agile, to be able to adapt to situations as new information and different demands arise. So all of those things I think are sort of wrapped up in a leader not reacting defensively to problems or alternative points of view, but just, you know, soaking in all of the different perspectives that he can.
I think that's really important, and from the perspective of Mount Gibson Iron at this point in time, I think it also helps that, as you're aware, we have a core executive and senior leadership team, and this is around the total business, that have worked together for quite some time. And there's tremendous respect for each individual's capabilities and experiences. When you get to that kind of area, you need to be cognizant that you don't turn stale. That's important. So an acquisition like the one we've recently announced of this gold project actually brings a whole flush of activity and interest, which is really good. But when you know the whole team and you've worked together for quite some time, I think that's a real positive because you can engage on what's important and know where the strengths are. of the individuals.
Yeah, and that's another key aspect of being a CEO and or indeed the chairman of a board, if you're in that role, to be able to harness the different talents and capabilities and points of view of a team of people who are smart, often they have firm convictions, firm opinions on matters. What's your tactic and your approach to getting the best out of a panel or a team of executive leadership level people?
Very much teamwork. So if we can define what we're after, define the problem or the issues up front, some people will go straight to the answer, and that's fine, but let's look at the key issues, analyse it without analysing it to death, and then decide, well, where, given the risks, do we want to be and what do we want to do? So I like in our business that not everything is run by team. You can't run a business by committee, but for key issues and key considerations, having team involvement, even if only one or two might be at the forefront of a negotiation or a particular operational issue, having everyone else aware of it is really important. And that's where people shouldn't feel afraid of raising that question. No such thing as a silly question. Might be humorous at times, but no, it should be considered properly.
Yeah, that's right. And encouraging people to share their ideas before you attempt to influence by imposing your authority, if you've got it, on a decision. There was a book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last, a very good one about how CEOs and chairmen of boards should go around the table and just encourage people to be absolutely open and frank in expressing their point of view, and leave his own or her own opinion to the end.
That's an interesting comment. I think to our team and our board, I think that's what we largely do. And you might not be in a position where everyone agrees all of the time, but that's, I think, life. And you make the call that best suits at the point.
It's always a very competitive marketplace, Peter, in terms of talent. I'm a career recruiter, and when I take on a brief from an employer company, it's really important that I get a good handle on what is the value proposition of the company so that I can effectively articulate that to a talented candidate who is, in some cases, being sought after by other companies as well, of course. When it comes to Mount Gibson, how would you summarise or how would you articulate the value proposition that your company offers? Do you have a pitch on that?
I do. The value proposition we offer, I've in effect covered some of the themes already, but is one of teamwork. And so honesty, transparency, teamwork, and bringing experience and technical capability into that. I think I would, if I canvass the leadership teams and the key teams and then the crews on the operating site, I think we'd find there is a family atmosphere in inverted commas, but a teamwork atmosphere. And that's largely been the result of people on our sites, people in the office, over the last 5+ years, building that culture. And I think once you start that, then it naturally attracts people of a similar nature. I don't know in our business whether we could really work with a disruptor or a really outwardly promotionally type spoken person. They may add value, so we consider it. But I think on the whole, people in our business are looking to be part of an enjoyable team that makes really good achievements.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. And people want to join a company that makes a difference to the broader community or the world, and I often think that value is in the eye of the beholder, and assuming that your financial incentives, the remuneration, are competitive with other players in the market.
I think you've got to have that as a given almost.
It's a given, and beyond that you need to look at what will attract and keep these really good talented people. And it may be that depending on the nature of the job, the function perhaps of the role, different things appeal to different people. As an interviewer of candidates, beyond the company having a healthy balance sheet and good cash flow coming from operations and a respected board of governance. Beyond those things and the money, people really do look at the purpose and the investment in the community. Perhaps environmental issues, social licence to operate, all of those things become factors in a candidate considering an opportunity. In our book Smart Value, we talk a lot about curating a value proposition that is tailored to suit a particular type of candidate, and go beyond a one-size-fits-all approach.
You mean a candidate who might come from a technical or non-technical background, different levels of leadership in the organisation? I mean, they all do vary.
Correct.
So that's...
They do, yeah. Different sorts of people look for different, sources of value, and that's why as either an internal recruiter or a market-facing search consultant, you really do need to try and work out where are the hot buttons for this particular candidate. You might think you know, but by having a conversation informally is the best way to do it. You can get to learn about what's important to that person, what are their values, and how well do they align with the key values, that the company has.
That's an interesting point. Values is a thing that you hear from all companies, and I think if you overlaid them in some kind of Venn diagram, you'd end up with the same, you would have seen this, the same type of words in the middle. And there is a voluminous number of integrity, honesty, respect type stuff, but that's absolutely critical as well. But I think your point about community and environment is really important, because we've seen that in our iron ore operations, particularly up in the Kimberley. Quite an isolated place. We're operating on an island. Not many mines operate on an island. And the environmental consequences of that and the work that we do is right up there amongst our top pieces of activity. So that is known by everyone on the site. And when you look at the scenery around, and when you're on that site and you can after hours go fishing, for instance, things like that, you know full well that the kind of person we want is someone who isn't going to be thinking about trashing a place. They're going to be thinking about how to do it properly and responsibly, which is really important.
Yeah, it is indeed. And we talk about values. Values are really the glue that behind a culture. Without good values and without leadership modelling those values so that people can see them manifested in particular sorts of behaviour, the company is rudderless.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidiscipline civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com.
Is your business ready to amplify its voice? At Podwave Studios, we offer professional video podcast production services that help you connect with clients, build your brand, and grow your audience. From corporate messaging to thought leadership, we've got you covered. Book your session at podwavestudios.au today.
As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy & Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
Let's talk about culture a bit. Some people would argue there is a business or a financial case for building and maintaining a strong, healthy culture. Do you believe that's the case? And if so, what is that business case?
That business case for me is absolutely critical, and in the first instance for mining goes to safety. So if you have a site where safety is not the front and foremost and the performance is good or improving, then all the other things will fall away, in my experience. So when you have a culture of respect and awareness and of people being able to say things that concern them, That's really important. And we've done that most of the time, not all of the time, and so it's constant improvement on that front. But to me, the business case of exactly the culture is critical. That leads to better safety, which has a very high positive correlation with better production performance. If you were to track that amongst mining companies, I'm sure you'd see all those high measures there.
I agree. All the important key business metrics head in the right direction if you've got a strong, healthy culture. Safety, you mentioned, quality, innovation, productivity, ultimately, of course, profit.
Although you can't do much about the commodity price you're dealing with, but that you must recognise that apart from maybe some hedging strategies, that's an uncontrollable, but you're there in that sector, hopefully to make advantage of prices when they're good, but you need all the other stuff first.
Yeah. When you are considering a manager or an executive for your business, Peter, and you need to consider how well aligned are they to the values-based culture of Mount Gibson? How do you go about doing that? What sort of tools do you use to help you come to grips with who that person is and how good the fit is?
Good question. The type of thing we do is obviously discussion and interview to find out more about the individual. Ask them some specific examples, hypothetical type things, and hear the responses. Plus, as you would know, you're the expert in this area, you go and check. And so you have a look at where they've been elsewhere and what have they done and what was the type of culture that they helped develop.
Very important to do all those things and, of course, spread the onus of responsibility for assessing that individual. In other words, whilst you might have your own opinion, get other people to have conversations with that people in both informal and formal environments.
One of the best ways we've found for that, and I'm sure you've done this, is where we've looked for senior management personnel or senior roles. We've not made any decisions until that person has been to site and not just had a one-on-one tour around the site, but actually met some of the other people around the place and had conversations as they tour in cars or have lunch, something like that. That's where you pick up there whether there's a fit.
Yeah, indeed. And, I often like to take somebody to a coffee shop, a candidate that is, to a coffee shop or a venue where we can have lunch, simply so I can observe how that person interacts with other people around him or her. Often the waitress, is there eye contact? Is there the professional courtesy of saying thank you when someone puts a coffee on the table for you? Little things perhaps, but for me they're important. They're important cues for how somebody might behave in a work context.
I'm sure I've seen that in a Hollywood movie or two with aeroplane flights.
Now, Peter, let's talk about some industry opportunities and challenges. These are standard questions I ask most executives. First of all, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the mining industry in Australia today?
It would be unsurprising if I didn't say people. And the mining industry in its current position and in order to grow needs good quality, educated, capable people. And that's for all roles on a site. So in terms of the issues there, the reputation of the industry, the education that's going into roles, and then another issue associated that is the FIFO versus the residential aspects. And clearly we've moved very much to the FIFO world now and away from what was the local community or the mining town type world. I think that's had all kinds of issues.
There's been a cost to that, hasn't there?
There has. And there's probably been quite a few gains to it as well, but certainly a cost on individuals as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. I'm doing some work at the moment for a gold mining company in New Zealand, and most of their professional senior management talent comes from the mainland of Australia. And, historically they've operated on a FIFO basis, people from Perth even, or Melbourne or Brisbane flying into New Zealand to do that.
Well, that's a tough time frame difference,
sure
5 hours or so to deal with, and it takes you a day or two on either side.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
It's almost impractical to sustain over the longer term. So this company has decided, okay, we've decided we need somebody embedded in the local community.
Yeah, smart call.
It's tough to get people to relocate because mainly they are in Australia. But this company recognises social license benefits of having a operational leader that is respected by the local community. Really important.
I should add, people obviously one issue, but very happy to cover the environmental and approvals aspect as well. And I don't mean that in terms of, I'm not anti-green, I mean that in terms of just practically what is a constructive good thing for the sector in seeking and obtaining approvals for various developments. That's an awkward one. And then there are other aspects as well, I guess, that go along with a whole range of reputational issues for the industry.
Let's pull that thread a bit, because you know as well as I do that for many years WA was ranked by international mining investors as the place to go. It was the number one jurisdiction in the world for investors to send their money to develop projects. The Fraser Institute that we both know about has most recently, a few months ago, produced the survey where WA is now ranked 17th most attractive jurisdiction in the world. 3 years ago, we were number one. Last year, I think we were number 4. How do we reverse that trend?
It's a difficult one. Clearly, our population is rising, and for development of operating sites and investment, you'll always hear the requirement, well, we need fewer approvals or faster approvals. That's always the case. It doesn't mean to me that everything should be approved, but it means there are ways of making that more efficient. Now, we've encountered that in our business. I'll give you an example where we wanted to look at a particular extension of a deposit on Koolan Island, opening up a new area, and in the end we decided we wouldn't, and that's not because of approval issues. We obtained approval, that's economic issues, so that's mining. But the whole process involved a duplicated process with the West Australian regulators. That actually ran pretty well. It took some time, but we were quite impressed with what happened. Then federally as well, the same thing is run through the process, the same issues, the same location, different requirements, and my gosh, the time frame just out of control in terms of length of time. So to the point where, years have advanced, and I'm not sure any value has been added by the regulator on that front federally with what we've been trying to achieve. That kind of thing is a very small thing in our business, and we certainly worked hard at it and could get there if we needed. But imagine if we were trying to do a bigger project, and we often comment about at Koolan Island and next door at Cockatoo Island, where there are 2 other operators mining or looking to mine. If we were trying to develop those operations today, I don't think we'd get there. And yet they've both been done in responsible ways that have added value for the local community, the Indigenous, traditional owners, a whole range of things. So to me, there's a lot of positives to outweigh the disturbance. But that process, something needs to occur. And there's a lot of effort into it. You talked about Warren Pearce. A lot of effort into trying to take out the red tape, leave it in substance with what really is needed. And I'm not saying you pull that away, because you actually do need controls of substance for these things. But at the same time, the duplication and cost and the inefficiencies, that's really the key focus area.
Yeah, I agree, and everybody talks about it, and it seems to be, not destroying our reputation globally, but certainly it's not enhancing our reputation. And Warren Pearce is working really hard to do that, to make things more efficient, and so is Tanya Constable, who was on the program a few months ago, the CEO of the Minerals Council of Australia. Yes. Now, she's lobbying for there to be a one-stop shop, federally and state regulators working more in harmony together to try and avoid some of this duplication and complicated, cumbersome process. And I think it's more about reducing the red tape, more so than the green tape. Like you, it's important that miners do things very responsibly and respectfully for the environment and social groups and so on. But it's just the bureaucratic red tape that drives people crazy.
I think that's the thing that has most mining organisations or development companies up in arms. And there have been some improvements and there have been some gains, particularly in WA. But that obviously for everyone's benefit, needs to continue.
AI is an interesting topic, Peter. Do you expect that generative AI will continue to impact the mining industry? And what do you regard as the key risks and benefits of AI?
Gee, that's a big question. I actually don't know the answer to all of that. AI in our business is used at the minute at the fringes. So it has an application in terms of documentation, for instance, drafting policies, procedures, or preparing correspondence and the like. We have been trialling and using that, so that's one application. In terms of fundamental mining operations, I'm sure it can go much, much further from where it is today. If you think about it, drilling or exploration, then resource definition, drilling programs, geological modelling, the wireframing of that model, then the optimisation for engineering design purposes. All of that has a very large amount of data set, manipulation of information. That's where AI, to me, could have actually a really strong application. And I'm sure already we say AI, but the software that's available does a lot of this already, but how can it be further advanced? That's what I'm really interested in, to see how could you actually even use it further than what you have now, or more real time. And I'm sure there are bigger companies doing more than we are, but from a mid-sized company point of view, I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, and certainly the big players, the big international miners, are heavily employing AI. And I see some tremendous benefits. The downside is that there will be a proportion of the working population who simply can't be upskilled or have difficulty adapting to other types of work because their more mechanistic process type work will be overtaken eventually by, algorithms and robots. Okay, we're running close to time here, Peter, so let's turn to some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Who is the leader, living or deceased, who would be your dream dinner guest, and what would be a compelling question that you'd need to ask them?
Oh gosh, I'll go back to a sporting decision. So I would go for Alan Border, former captain of the Australian cricket team and a player who existed through tumultuous times and performed superbly. My question would be, what were the processes he went through in selecting a side? So it's a team building exercise. The best technically, not the best technically, but the best team's contributor. How do you mix up a team of 11 or 12 people to get the best result from a team?
It's a really interesting thought, and you're dead right. And aren't there so many good analogies between sport and business?
There are many of them.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
John Wellborn from Phoenix,
Right.
who was on the program, we know his history as a Wallaby, and he uses so many analogies, about one of the things he said to me was, David, whilst there might be one person on the team who has a C in brackets after their name, everybody on that team is expected to show leadership quality. So you're dead right. You don't necessarily need the best individual contributor on a team. You need somebody who can, encourage and inspire others, and it is all about teamwork.
Here's a backstory for you, David. John and I went to the same school. In actual fact, we were in high school at the same time. And I was the captain of our house that we were in, and John was several years younger. And when I left, I was asked by the housemaster, who amongst the next few years down do you see as being potential leaders, and we'll keep our eyes on them. And so I'd obviously picked that up through sports and academia, and John was one of those. So, and sure enough, a couple of years later, he was house captain.
You've told him that?
I think I have.
He'll enjoy that story. Great bloke.
It wasn't my doing. He did it himself.
What's a non-fiction book you've read that you think would be valuable to other people in terms of helping them navigate their career and develop their leadership skills?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one because I read very little fiction and I love non-fiction, particularly hardback books. In actual fact, my family laugh at me because if we go travelling and overseas, there are two rules. One is a bookstore of substance and the other is an auto car museum. So there's two interests. But in terms of non-fiction books, I don't think I could really highlight one. There are plenty, yours, for instance, plenty that are business and people oriented that are very good, and you have to, in my view, pick out, you can't take all of it out. You pick out the few key things that just gel with you as tricks or things to remember that you might apply sometime in the future. There are thousands of business books in airports and the like. I've seen them all, but I haven't read too many of them that are non-technical in nature. But that would be my takeaways. Any of them, but pick out the 2 or 3 kernels of info that you need.
We've talked a bit about sports today. One that I've read, not necessarily the most valuable book I've read, but there's one called Legacy about the All Blacks and about their culture.
Right.
And the pride that they take in wearing that jersey, and the fact that at the end of a match, apparently, all of the All Black players stay back and clean the changing rooms. They tidy it up.
Right. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's just a tradition. And it's a matter of, combining humility with leadership and saying, okay, we're not beyond cleaning up our mess afterwards. We don't need other people to do it. We take pride in the way that we, treat our changing rooms and how we operate on the field.
Right.
Good book.
That is a good book. I wasn't aware of that. Probably need to ask John Wilmore.
What's the best business or career advice someone has given you?
I think when I go back to the key people that I've worked with along the way, the message has generally been, obviously be prepared and have a capability to learn, but take a chance would be the advice I get. And that doesn't mean, rolling one number on the roulette table. That means taking an informed chance, make a change, but do it in a calculated way that could really have a positive payoff or a positive benefit, rather than sit there and fret and worry about analysing all the scenarios.
That's a really good one. Take a calculated risk, and if and when inevitably, you make a mistake or you fail,
you will
learn from it. That's how you progress and advance, isn't it?
Yep.
Learn from your mistakes.
Correct. Yep.
What are you most optimistic about?
I'm very optimistic about Australia as a nation. I live here. I've actually lived overseas for many years in the Middle East, the UK, Canada, Indonesia, range of places. And my wife and I came back here when we had our children. That's Perth, which is a wonderful place. And so when I look at it, I go, well, I can see lots of issues and lots of matters to overcome. But overall, this country has fantastic resources. It's diversified its economy greatly, and we live in a wonderful part of the world. Isolation is not always bad. So I'm very optimistic about Australia on the assumption that it's carefully and properly managed, but I think there's lots of opportunity here.
And what's a big risk that we're not paying enough attention to?
I think I'm an accountant by background, so don't spend what you can't afford. Right, then that would come down to, very easy to say, almost impossible to deliver from a governmental point of view. But are we spending today and building up a cost base in this country that we can never really afford unless we have amazing booms and one-off windfalls? But how do we get something sustainable?
Yeah. It's very challenging to do, isn't it? With an ageing population that we do, health costs, as one consideration, are just increasingly, unsustainable. So as you say, governments have got a real task in front of them trying to work that out.
And I think that pervades right through everyone's lives on this, in this country.
Yeah. What inspires or energises you?
People and teamwork and working towards something that comes off as a success. I mean, that is the ultimate piece. I think there are many people who, and I put it down, here's a sporting analogy again. There are some sports like a marathon runner, you have a support team, but it's very much an individual thing. And there are other sports, hockeys and crickets, etc., the world, AFL footy, where you are a team member. Rowing, to me, is the one that's the ultimate because In a rowing 8 or even with the Cox, if one person fails, the whole boat stops.
Did you row at Scotch
I
College?
didn't actually, no. So I was too busy running around the hockey field, I think, at that time.
Mm.
But from that aspect, teamwork is really important. I don't know whether you saw the Ryder Cup recently.
No.
So the Ryder Cup is a US versus European golf competition every couple of years, I think. And the Europeans won it this year. And it was actually hotly contested. The crowd behaviour was at times pretty ordinary. It's been widely reported. But in a golf team, and I don't know how many are in a team, but maybe 15 or something like that overall in a squad, they talk about how individual the sport is for the rest of the 2-year period, but this is their number one event because they are playing with colleagues in a team to achieve an outcome. And they were the type of comments that came from the European side. And the American side was obviously disappointed, but the European side was saying this is the number one event. And when you think about that, these individuals have won amazing championships all the way through, but this one is a team one, and that's their number one.
That seems analogous to the Davis Cup in tennis.
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
yes.
where people sort of represent their country,
Yep.
whereas for the rest of the year they're fighting
Representing
it out as
themselves.
individuals.
Yeah.
Just going back to the rowing, so I was a rower, and not a very good one when I was at school. But someone said to me that rowing, perhaps alone of all of the sports, it's absolutely critical that no individual in that boat stands out as more capable than the rest. In other words, because of, it's synchronised, you want people to row in unison. Nobody needs to be an outlier in that boat of 8 people plus the Cox. Here's an interesting one, Peter. If your home was on fire, God forbid, and you knew your family and your pets were safe, what's the one item in your home that you dashed to retrieve before you left the building?
Oh my gosh, I would be thinking it's something to do with family treasures, so family photographs that maybe are not backed up. I mean, it's probably a modern, boring answer, but there's a hard drive in a back room somewhere with family photographs going back, and I'd probably go for something like that, the history of it. Everything else can be replaced.
What's a productivity hack or a daily habit that you think other people might find value in?
Carefully considering, the way I would approach things in terms of daily habit, to me, activity is all the time. So sporting activity obviously gets chemistry in the body moving and builds, I think, something away from work that enables you, when you get back to work, to be refreshed and going for it. So that would be the number one thing. Number two thing would be I'm a constant list generator and prioritiser. So, and I learnt that from a gentleman who hired me 30 years ago into a gold mining development company that was eventually we built up as a small team and sold off. But his view was these are all the tasks. They might be all over the place. Which 5 are you going to do today?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Right.
And so is Wayne Bramwell. That was his answer to that question. Wayne Bramwell, the CEO of Westgold. So, on a little yellow stick-it pad, first thing in the morning, okay, this is the time available to me. These are all of the tasks that need to be done. Let's prioritise them. Which are the top 3, top 4, 5 that I need to accomplish today?
I think that's right. What you will find, what I find when I do that is I do have colleagues saying to me, I've been on the lower end of the priority list for some time. Come on, mate, give me a break. So you do need to make sure that's the case. I read the other day, and I can't remember the individual's name. He's a CEO of a larger industrial company over east, who said every night he goes through and deletes or deals with and removes everything from his email inbox. I would find that impossible, right? I try to keep that down to maybe 50 to 80 emails in there at any one time as a to-do list almost. To remove it each night, great ambition, but I think you then need a much bigger organisation where people are doing your work for you.
Might be a bit of OCD in that person, I think.
It could be, yes.
Final question, Peter. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
So the 25-year-old Peter Kerr, I'd be saying be healthy, be sporty, enjoy life and do things for other people.
Yeah, good on you. Nice sentiment. Peter, thank you for being our guest on Hearts and Minds. You've always been accessible to us, and we appreciate that. And good luck with your future work at Mount Gibson.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here, and there is a lot of work ahead of us, but we're looking forward to it.
Good on you. And listeners, if you work in the mining industry and you would like a copy of our book, Smart Value, which presents the findings of our research into the talent management practices of many of our mid-tier companies, just give me a call, and happy to send you one with our compliments. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.